What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Actuali Podcast. It's Meaning Making 101. I'm Chris,
I'm DJ.
and today we are going to cover another of one of the most controversial topics that we can possibly cover, and hopefully bring some sense into the mix. We're going to try and make meaning of the social breakdown, the rising division and discord that we're seeing in our culture today, particularly the ramping up of that in the last number of years, but particularly in this past week since the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. And so we're going to see how can we create peace and goodwill in times of division and strife. So we're going to start out by investigating exactly how did we get into this mess. There's a theory out there of a force called Moloch. And now Liv Boree or Boree, um, poker player and game theorist, is going to break that down for us. So let's switch on over for multi-screen.
Screen of multiple.
All right, Liv.
Moloch was originally coined apparently back in the Canaanite times. There was supposedly this death cult who would sacrifice their children to this awful demon god thing they called Moloch in order to get power, to win wars.
The Israelites, the neighbors of Canaan, are so horrified by the child sacrifice occurring in Canaan that it's going to be mentioned as a sin throughout the Old Testament, and it's going to be a damned offense.
Whether they actually existed or not, we don't know, but in mythology they did, and this god that they worshipped was this thing called Moloch. This movie, Metropolis, in 1927, talked about there was this incredible futuristic city that everyone was living great, but then the protagonist goes underground into the sewers and sees that the city is run by this machine. And this machine basically would just kill the workers all the time because it was just so hard to keep it running. So there was all this suffering that was required in order to keep the city going. And then the protagonist has this vision that this machine is actually this demon Moloch. So again, it's like this sort of mechanistic consumption of humans in order to get more power. And then Allen Ginsberg wrote a poem called Howl about this thing Moloch.
I saw the best minds of my generation.
You and I and many people in our sphere both came across this frame from Scott Alexander's Meditations on Moloch paper.
But what was the mental upgrade when you got the concept of Moloch? You're like, oh, now I understand this.
It was reading Meditations on Moloch by Scott Alexander.
It was the closest thing to a religious experience of reading a piece of writing.
Let's jump out of that now because that's a good opening to what exactly is this thing called Moloch. So it's an ancient concept of something like a demon or a demiurge that is the product of zero-sum games, the kind of competition to where we just get ourselves into this lose-lose scenario and we keep anteing up to try and out bad the other that we see as bad. It's a pretty crazy thing that happens.
And you can look at Moloch as well as not just the sacrifice of our children, but innocence and in for children as well. So, and the term innocence, I'm defining that right now as, not having experienced pain or horror. So what you do is you sacrifice your innocence to the machine that consumes those that keep the machine going, but you got to keep the machine going. And you feed it by sacrificing your innocence, whether it's literally children. And, there's some things to be said about the 600 to 1 million children that are aborted every year. This system going, as well as the innocence of our own hearts. We've become very hateful towards each other to keep this machine going. And that movie, Metropolis, definitely worth watching. It's dated, but if you like older films, it's definitely worth watching. It's an art piece more than it is a narrative. And with good art, you code a lot of information. But
yes, you can. There's actually a story by, I believe it was Ursula Le Guin, science fiction writer, called "Those or the Ones Who Walk from Omelas," that is based off of this theme as well, where there's this little boy that's kept in this dark, tiny cage, and he's just kind of kept in a state of complete misery and torture And this allows for the rest of the city of Omelas to be able to live this luxurious life that they live through this cruel sacrifice of the innocent. And you'll have to read the story for yourself to see how it ends. It's a short story, but it's definitely worth a read. So that was from Liv Bourret. The video is titled Moloch, the Deadly Force Driving Humanity to the Brink? Question mark at the end. And you can find that on Liv's channel, Win Win, with Liv Bourret. That's Boeree.
Also, Moloch and Baal or Baal have been joined at times, like Beelzebub and Baal have also been combined at times as well. So it gets a little hairy, but it gets a little fuzzy, but the concept's still the same. The sacrifice of innocence, a warlike machine going where there is no on either side.
Yeah.
And that's the evil of it. Like the true evil of it is there's no winning. The victors don't even win.
That's the self-destructive nature of it. Yeah. How whole civilizations, perhaps even planetary civilizations like our own, can end up crashing in on themselves. So how do we get ourselves out of this vicious cycle without something like a sense of unconditionality towards our neighbors, even those we disagree with? And I'm talking about that unconditionality of that thing that we call love, that capacity to be able to see that there's an element of divine within every single human, every bit of life around us. And that allows us a different kind of relationship with reality rather than the subject-object orientation we get stuck in, where there's myself and then there's the other. Mm-hmm. We don't feel our sense of interconnection anymore as we used to. We're going to get on to that stuff.
Actually, even within our own self, there is the other self as well. You've heard this idea, and I've used the term, but your true self versus the other self. Still, it goes in ego, as well. Yeah. As out. The
cast image, the personage that we play life through, that ego that we get attached to, that psychological sense of self-identity is, of course, an illusory thing that we hold in our minds that we do act through. But there is a true self underneath that, the thing that has the personality. What is that?
But it's interesting that split, that divide between the two even starts within the self.
You're right. Because of our relationship with reality, again, sense of the sacred interconnection between us and everything around us. So here's another video from Liv. This one's titled, Is the Media Moloch Driving Us Insane? So this is going to be about how media driving division between us through its zero-sum game style of competition. Liv, being an expert in game theory, is the perfect person to learn about this from. So definitely check out her channel and find the links in the description of this video. Go ahead and pull this up now, guys.
Dun, 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 dun.
Here we are. We're just going to watch the first few minutes of this, but this is highly worthwhile.
Our way of life is under attack.
The patients are literally gasping for it.
It's us versus them.
Putin's veiled threat to use nuclear weapons.
They say he was using anal beads to
You're allowed to say it. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Playing it in concert at the same.
Liv, look at this. Can you believe it? That is outrageous. Quick, comment how stupid and awful he is. People need to be reminded. Okay. Wait, what if this just gives him more attention? Who cares? He can't just get away with it. True. I just can't believe anyone is this ignorant. Okay, so comment. Let us know. In fact, maybe do a quote tweet so your followers see it too.
So today I want to talk about rage, because doesn't it feel like everyone's going a little mad lately, especially online? But I swear, every day some new thing comes up that might start out completely innocuous, but will inevitably devolve into some politicized nightmare of left versus right, trends and counter-trends, where everyone's just screaming at each other through the digital void. It's also miserable and hostile, and yet so weirdly addictive. Like, I've lost count of how many times I've got sucked into some online debate, even though I didn't even want to. I even had to get one of these stupid safes to keep my phone in because the online world is so ever-present and tempting. It's almost like there's some insidious force acting through it, trying to get its hooks into my brain so that I can go online and do its bidding.
You cannot hide.
And my personal issues aside, I wanted to talk about this because, well, frankly, this is getting really scary. Because not only are we seeing more and more sort of radicalization and civil unrest here at home, but this is increasingly starting to affect our chances of solving these really big global coordination problems like climate change and pandemics and arms races, which require us to come together to solve. And instead, we're getting torn more and more apart. So what the hell is going on? You know, are we acting this way because everything really is falling apart? Or is it more that our perception of the world is getting twisted, which is making us crazy and then sort of turning this all into a big self-fulfilling prophecy? Well, as always, the answer is far from simple, because it's certainly true that there are plenty of individuals out there who are directly profiting from all this drama. But the thing is, there's something even deeper at play here, a force far more reckless than any one individual company. A force so powerful, it can infect an entire industry and turn that industry from one of our greatest tools into one of our greatest threats.
Yep. This was a great video. She just released this one a few months ago.
Whether it's the Matrix or...
So, definitely worth checking out, guys. So now we're going to move on to something
that urge, that feeling you get where you know you're not going to feel good about getting into the shitstorm on the interwebs and doing that stuff. You still do it anyway. And I know this is the reason why I don't have a Facebook or anything else like that, because I know that portion of myself. I hold my demons really close, and I'm very familiar with them, and that whole got to say something. You got to say something. And, I'm not eloquent enough to be able to politely put something that sings in the right way to fulfill that addictive urge. So I become quite the phallus, if you will, the other word for the phallus, dick. Yeah, I become that. And, but then you got this thing justifying it. It's like, well, it's fine because they're ignorant. They're stupid. They don't know. They need to know. And it's their fault that they don't know. And it's just like, whoa.
And we feel justified in our rage or our anger or our frustration. So we end up voicing things with that kind of tonality. And it, of course, only exacerbates the issue. It's just throwing fire onto an inferno and adding more to it. So that's a really good point, man, because it's so easy for us to get riled up. And I love how Liv portrays that Moloch within ourselves, that Satan or lesser angel, the dark angel on the one shoulder, like just speaking into your ear, tempting you to take part in the insanity. How do we pull ourselves back and not see our fellows as others and dehumanize them? Because we're getting into, like she points out, a zero-sum game here. So, now we're going to jump in and look at somebody that one of our listeners brought up and comment on a previous episode. This is a KGB defector, Yuri
Bezmenov.
Thank you. How to say his last name correctly there. There it is. So this is just a quick short, guys, but let's bring this up on the screen as well. Here we are.
Subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. This is the minimum number of years which requires to educate one generation generation of students exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. Ideological subversion is the...
Yeah, man.
So,
well, that's well said. So let's give a little bit more background because I kind of jumped forward there, realizing that now. So a defector from the KGB intelligence agency of the Soviet Union at the time came here, sought asylum in the U.S., and then started to tell us about the KGB's slow process of how they demoralize a nation to fight, to attack it, and get it to turn on itself so that it destroys itself from within.
And what they call it is active measures. I can't say the Russian, but it translates to active measures or
psychological warfare, basically.
Yeah, ideological subversion. And the idea is to program at least a generation with the values of their enemy, and then that generation, if sufficiently programmed, will program the next generations, spread it through the country. So no longer do you have to have outside forces to come in and subvert people. You have people doing it themselves of their own volition, the little Moloch in their head telling them to do it, do it.
So they basically seed the country with a kind of cultural Marxism that's tailor-made for the U.S.
Oh yeah, the KGB were very, very, very good at looking at the science.
And this was most
psychology.
of their and this was most of their intelligence resources. Like Yuri states another part in this video that about 15% of their efforts are towards actual typical spy tactics, like you see in James Bond movies, and then the other 85% is this ideological subversion techniques that they use, and it's a slow game, and they know it's going to take generations to pull it off. But
yeah, and we won't necessarily go into it this episode, but just like in short and stuff, what they do is they send out their agents or people who have been sufficiently programmed in other ways to make friends with people within institutions and start rubbing shoulders and capture institutions. So first you get, like, say in university, one university professor in there who went and was in India partying with some guy that was real cool, that this Russian guy that broke free from Russia and decided to come hang out with the yogis and do all that stuff. And actually Yuri Bezmenov talks about using yogiism, but what yoga and all that stuff and of that era, they found that as a very helpful tool because it bred complacency, as in, well, I just do my meditation, drop out for the people who aren't going to be active renegade, right? So it took a whole, all the people that or the generation you're training, the ones who aren't susceptible to that training will at least back out. And the ones who are fanatical, will actually become the trainers. So then you capture these people and you put them in institutions. And, like Bernie had the same thing happen to him. He got taken to the USSR and they showed him all the good stuff. And even North Korea does this today. You can see YouTubers that are allowed in North Korea, and they have the grand roll out the red carpet for you and make everything seem real good. Like now North Korea is kind of, I don't want to say a joke, but a joke, because
that's the obvious one.
That's the obvious one. We're like, those fruits are obviously made out of wax.
Yeah, those are definitely fake restaurants with people that have never actually run a restaurant before, trying to run it.
So
for the journalist that's visiting at that moment.
The way the Soviets targeted us is first in university, and then from the university went up and down. And so up would be into the corporate world, because people getting out of university, they get positions in the corporate world. That tends to be what you get. If you go into university, you're going into the corporate sphere or the public service sphere. That's the other end too. So politicians and corporate. And then you have the teachers that were taught all this stuff that go down and start teaching K through 12. If you're in the United States, I don't know what they call it in other countries.
So you start learning about oppressor and oppressed and equity.
But they don't even tell you that in the beginning. They just subtly hint at things.
Yes.
Just throw a little bit in there. It's like, well, maybe on the math sheet they'll have a little art piece, and the kid has 5 apples is like a white blonde haired boy, and then the kid who only has 3 apples is a little black girl or something like that. Like just that subtle, like even to the point where you don't even notice
So
it.
the Soviet Union was wise to figure out our weak points and attack them there, and so we've gone from the 80s and 90s where there was such beautiful healing between the so-called races in America. I mean, we're just one human race here, regardless of the color of skin. We're all like different shades of brown. That's all it really is. But, they basically target those points where there has been division and civil discord, and they try and re-inflame them. And they have been very successful in that in this last, number of years. We've seen the resurgence of racism, and under the guise of things like anti-racism, which in and of themselves have so much in common with racial supremacists like the KKK. It's disturbing stuff to see become popular and people get taken in by it, but it's always done in a benevolent guise, and it often hooks you before you even notice it. And then when we become so identified with our ideas and positions that we're not willing to question ourselves, we can really get caught up in defending these things, even beyond the point of reason. So, this is where we're at. So let's look at. I was watching another video earlier this week from the LFR family, and it talking about this very video we were just watching from Yuri Beznomov. And so let's hear what our LFR fam has to say on this subject now. Jumping on over, guys.
For all the people who are saying on Twitter and other and on other platforms to myself and other content creators who are going down this path right now, and you're saying that we're lost, we're brainwashed, we're doing Uncle Thomas work and all that other stuff. The anger and the vitriol that you're bringing this way, simply because we're trying to get ahead of the nonsense that's been placed in front of us for so long, trying to be well learned, well versed, and understand exactly where we are and where we're going. You have an issue with that. You might want to ask yourself, why are you fighting so hard to keep the confusion going? You might want to ask yourself, before presenting other facts to debunk whatever's being said to you, how about you look at what's being presented right now, what's being said right now, and see if there's any truth there. If there's some truth there, then acknowledge it and give me whatever truths you want to share with me. That's how that works. Something's happening.
Dialogue.
A nation has been trained for decades now to turn around and change into what we're doing right now. Everything you see right now,
that's it.
So he's talking about the self-Socratic method there, and that's how you kick Moloch off your shoulders. You start to have that conversation. Okay, well, what's the truth? What is going on? Instead of immediately going out and having that conversation with the person on the internet.
Instead of taking on this debate format where we're opposing one another at each other, we take on the position that you see us sitting in right now, in fact, to where we are shoulder to shoulder trying to figure this out together. Okay, let me hear what you think is true on this subject. And then you consider, hopefully, fairly and openly and honestly, what I am seeing as true. And we start to then try and steelman each other's positions to make sure that we understand them and we can repeat them in our own words. Say, okay, so you believe this, so and so and so. And it sounds to me like you're saying this. If you can get the other person to agree with your steelmanning, then now you know you have a good fix on where they're coming from. And then we can start trying to take apart both of our conceptions together, and we can find out what is the actual truth that is behind both of our opinions.
Yeah,
because there is an actual truth there. Otherwise, what's the point of debating any subject? So what we're talking about here is turning debate into dialogue.
And what might, like I guess where this starts is like you start that process with yourself first. And then you start gathering their information, and you're naturally in conversation with, say, like, even though this is a one-sided conversation, but with LFR family, what we just did there, we checked out something. Yeah, we're not talking with him, but he's talking to us. And still, that is one part of the conversation. You keep doing that, and you try to glean as much as you can. And once you feel like you have a weight of valuable information that you're trying to sift through, then you can start more honestly bringing it out to other people instead of just the raging out in the beginning.
Mm-hmm,
Now you actually have a little bit of weight.
Yeah, because
to
can
bring
you
and sift
feel
through.
the emotion in the air right now around what's happened recently with the Trump assassination? The attempted assassination on Trump? Because, there's people out there, with some pretty wild opinions, and everyone's quite certain that their opinion is the right one, and anyone that disagrees with them is now an enemy on some level, and to be treated with vitriol. And we got to get ourselves out of this, because we're playing right into that divide and conquer methodology. Now, who could possibly be behind the divide and conquer methodology? There's a lot of theories around that too, but it certainly begins, like DJ has been wise to point out, it begins within each one of us and our capacity to see the world around us as either something separate or something that we are deeply integrated and involved in.
Yeah, well, the agent is no agent without its arena.
That's
so
right.
We might as well recognize that the agent and the arena are co-identifying things.
There you go.
And play the game as such.
Thanks, Vervaeke.
Yeah, I'm trying to, cause we spent a long time watching Vervaeke stuff, and it was definitely worth it. And for people who are new here, I'd advise going and checking out John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis series. It's a slog, but it's very intriguing and gets you going, and it gives you a vocabulary in which to define and describe things, at least in my sense of it, that I didn't really have words and communal concepts to describe.
And a way to even view and understand and make meaning of reality in these rapidly changing, destabilized times. Because it's so much to keep up with all that's going on out there. What is true? What isn't? How should I feel about this or that? Check out the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis series, because it is designed to help usher in an awakening from this, time of destabilization and division that we find ourselves in.
Oh, I'd be completely lost.
It describes to us how we got here and how we may get out of it.
I could tell you that series, going through it, really helped me, because so on the date that it had, so July 13th when it happened, we were playing a show in one of our local towns here, and then it's a sports bar, so there's a million TV screens everywhere, and it was just up there. And if I was going through this, I probably would have been a lot more affected as far as performance wise and just engaging with at it performance wise than I was. And I have to credit Vervaeke. He's a good influence, a good nerdy fellow with a good heart and the right kind of nerdiness that works with the way my nerdiness brain works. Because he'll say something and use his hands, and I'm like, yep, got it. All right, the hands really helped.
They do help.
Good speakers,
that
good storytellers are really
a lot.
Oh yeah.
Alrighty, guys. So now we're just gonna check out a little clip from Thomas Well Legacy Channel. I thought this was a beautiful point that he makes here, and this is in regards to another video from Yuri Beznomov, where he talks about what is the solution to ideological subversion. Jump on over.
You stand with God, but you need to see this.
Have you ever met a person who would sacrifice his life, freedom, for the truth like that?
Nah.
This is truth. But millions sacrifice their life, freedom, comfort, everything for things like God, like Jesus Christ. It's an honor. Something which is not material moves society and helps it to survive. So the answer to ideological subversion, strangely enough, is very simple. You simply have to have faith.
Have faith. Have faith. Wow.
Not to be a victim of subversion. Don't strike like that. Strike with the power of your spirit and moral superiority. If you don't have the power, it's high time to develop it.
Now, I don't know where you stand with God.
Okay, so even if you don't agree with this young man's point of view or Yuri's point of view here, the point that I see Yuri making here is that without a sense of the sacred and a sense of reverence for that sacredness of this reality that runs through everything and everyone, we can easily try to solve problems through violence and force and zero-sum games and get captured and caught up by Moloch, essentially. And so that shared sense of reverence that you find in spiritual communities is a powerful healing source, and it's a revolutionarily powerful source. We were talking about how we can be taken in by ideological subversion and how this sense of the sacred can help ameliorate that. I've already lost my train of thought here.
I think you're talking about, I don't know if it's in the next clip, but the idea that like secularism doesn't cancel the belief in God, but it's against the the faith, the idea of worship, worshiping. So it's, secularism is non-worshipful. Opposed, like you can believe in God, fine. Like most secularists I know believe in some type of God, whether it's like you're more agnostic end or you're I'm just a lapsed this, that, or the other religion. But so the one thing.
Oh, okay, I remember now.
Okay.
So you were talking about the India and yogiism.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And so spirituality without action in the world is merely us sitting on the mountaintop seeking to achieve enlightenment. And there is a point in the story of the Bodhisattva where he comes down from the mountain with the self-realization that of the inherent oneness of reality, and he begins to partake in reality again. And I think that's the point, and that's basically what we get from figures like Jesus Christ, is they show us how to embody a way of being even amidst the turmoil of the world, even amidst great strife and even the most torturous death imaginable. We have this example of one who was able to maintain the highest love. And so that, I think, is the key. And I think that's what this young man was just talking about here in this video from Yuri, and what Yuri was talking about as well.
And in that,
it's got to be action oriented. It can't just be us sitting alone meditating. You're right, because that becomes something where we can become lackadaisical.
Well, and then also I couldn't think of the
disconnected from the actual going on of reality that we are partaking in.
Well, and the thing is I couldn't think of anything more selfish than to, like, well, I'm enlightened. I figured out peace sitting on the hill while you watch the town here above be firebombed.
Yeah.
So, and to last week's episode, we were talking about what's the word? Basically, the idea of being able to feel and see things and feel the emotion, but to be able to be several layers back for equanimity. That's all fine and dandy, and actually that's pretty good when like it comes to really high stress situations, like somebody hurts themselves or
well, that's key always.
But you can't just sit back in that and
that's not what equanimity is. That just means that you can maintain an even keel, just like Jesus was.
Yeah.
But let's not even when he raged out on the dudes in the temple, the money changers, he immediately came back to his loving state as soon as he was done showing his just righteous anger, you could say.
Well, and that's the balance is and it's not confusing equanimity with retreating.
Mm-hmm.
You're not retreating back in a way,
or hatred.
You're allowing yourself to feel it, see it, and not be reactionary towards it. And that's kind of like what the Stoics getting at is like, because like the people, at least the people I know that have gotten into Stoicism are very emotionally dynamic and or volatile people,
and we don't want to be so emotionally overwhelmed that we lose our better senses, that we are taken in and taken over by that anger.
So like, and in this last video for our listeners, he was talking about the initial, it's like, well, nobody fights for this truth, and it was 2 + 2 = 4, 2 × 2 = 4. But we'll fight over this truth, and that was the truth of God or Jesus Christ. And I think that points to, it's like, well, there's truth, like like 2 × 2 = 4. That's truth. But we're not gonna like fisticuffs over that, and there's no power in that truth. But there's a truth in faith that is so powerful that it makes it worth fighting for, and I don't mean violently fighting for, even though a lot of religion's a good example of how you can start wars, I guess, but like within yourself, fighting your inner nature to feel and realize that truth, say, of faith, and practice it. Even though you want to get angry, you want to be responsive, you want to, just like, get one up on that guy on the Facebook, and, like, and even if that guy's your mom, like, or somebody else's mom, or, what, like, you got to fight that urge, and faith is worth the fight on that end.
Have faith in the power of our lovingness to heal and overcome our divisions, our disagreements. This orientation is the way of being that we have lost in recent times, a sort of fellowship type of practice of, and regardless of one's religion or spirituality or spiritual path, may we try and orient back to this way of being. I think that this is at the heart of the solution that we are looking for in this time of meaning crisis. So let's jump over here now to Jordan and James Cortides. I covered this on episode 112 of the podcast, so if you're looking to learn a little bit more about this, go ahead and jump on over there. You can also find the link to this video in the description. This conversation is quite profound, and where Jordan goes after James's moment here that we're going to share now again today is just incredible. It's absolutely beautiful. It probably will need to be listened to a couple more times by myself to fully be able to explicate what Jordan is saying, but we'll get there. So let's go ahead and let's jump on over to this now. I'm going to watch a short minute of this clip.
And what does that mean, a negation of worship? Because it's not an effacement of worship. It's not a disbelief in God. It's a very specific thing, a negation of worship. And I had this picture in my head of it leaving a vacuum when this happened. And in my head, it comes to like the idea of Descartes, which, I think, therefore I am, which really inaugurated the subject-object divide. And I see that rift between subject and object as a vacuum being the negation of worship, right? In that, before that happened, we were really orienting ourselves and our identity as embedded within a community, within a people, where it was really something new, where this cleavage happened between subject and object, and then subject and other. And then because of this distinction, we've had this beautiful way of organizing our world scientifically and inaugurating, technologies and modernizing, really instantiating modernity. But I think it's that the negation of worship and secularism that really stuck with me. And it's something like, and I wrote this down, is that, right worship is an immunization from ideology. And that rift of the negation of worship brought in this possibility, a probability of turning things into ideologies, because worship doesn't go away. It's been negated. So there's a felt absence there, and there's an inclination to not consciously fill that felt absence with the ideological capture, in a sense.
Yeah, well said there.
Create a problem, fill it with a created solution. So, and I'm not saying there's some cabal that did
no,
this,
but we search for these things. So once we lose our sense of interconnection with one another, with our communities, and that shared sense of reverence for that oneness of all life that's there throughout all the world's great religions and spiritual traditions. Once we lose touch with that in a communal fashion, then it's very easy for us to start seeing ourselves as separate to the degree that we're willing to dehumanize one another. And subconsciously, we start searching for something to replace that old sense of connection we used to have. So then we're taken in by groupthink. Then we can be taken in by ideologies.
Yeah, and so the secularization of the human species was very profound, because for pretty much all of our, from all archaeological evidence we can find, even Neanderthal, we had a worshipful capacity to us that was more than just a flight of fancy or something on the surface. It was a very deep survival mechanism and an understanding of the world mechanism in which not just a lone self, but a lone self then gathering with other lone selves, creating a communal self, and then practices get by and survive in the world. Once we got into the secular divide, and that would be the time of Martin Luther, even before Martin Luther, but we can say Martin Luther, the separation of, okay, well, you go to the church world, but like how the town is, run and all this stuff is separate from that. Very novel concept for humans. I mean, like,
and it helped us build civilization as we know it today.
Sure, but
there is a double edge to this sword.
Well, and one thing though is even before this, though, we were having massive advances in technology and flourishing as well. And then, the Great Plague hit and it took out most of the world. So there was this hole created, the separation, or I don't even want to call it a hole. It's like it's like spiritual lobotomy. It's separating your material, so your object self, and your subject self. Separation of it, and we're going to feel that separation, and we want to fill it with something, and in comes ideology.
So when identity is no longer something that we find in a communal sense, and it becomes more and more self-focused and other-focused, find ourselves ideologically captured more and more easily.
Well, and
seeking for that sense of connection once again.
And frankly, like identifying and self-identification doesn't actually exist in vacuum by itself. The word identify is to be able to classify and understand something. So, if we have this identity-based system that isn't
right into the community.
Yeah, caressed within this community, then it just becomes this non-thing and not like a no thing.
A very disconnected thing that feels alone and feels separate from those in the world around it.
It's no wonder, like, if you look at identity politics, there's, just look at the pronouns. How many pronouns are there right now?
Trying to find meaning in identity.
Identity, but whereas, like, a pronoun is a thing that helps us identify what something else is, another person is, you need to know. But then it gets to the point where it's not even like, he, she, or they. It's like fey self and fem self and, blocka, 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 florbo self or whatever. And it's like, well, that's the opposite of being able to identify something.
We're becoming overly obsessed with our outward projections, aren't we?
Well, it's almost like, that since it doesn't make sense to ourselves and we've separated ourselves so far from something of a community that we've got to force it to be a community and either force it on others that are unwilling or force it on others who are willing, but it's not a natural.
So we're creating now ideological identities.
Yeah, well, and even you can look at left to right, Democrat, Republican,
so
liberal,
images,
conservative.
Self-images based off of the ideas that we hold, rather than a deep sense of interconnection with everything and everyone around us, as we used to have with our communities when we had a shared spiritual sense of the sacred within everything and everyone. And so we really have lost touch, haven't we?
Yeah, well, it's getting really hard to like, the definition of words are getting really muddy. Not to be like 1984, but like 1984, dude.
Yeah. No, everything's gotten quite Orwellian, and there's a lot of doublethink going on where we'll hold two even opposing ideas at once and believe both of them. That's happening a lot in our societies right now.
Well, and even feeling it, because right now I feel like a very liberal conservative.
Right.
Isn't that weird? Or a right-wing liberal, if that makes any sense.
Or, or just a disenfranchised or disenchanted liberal, because something has infested liberalism, and it's been so infested by leftism that it's moving further and further into an extreme ideological position.
That gets back to definitions. Like, we need to reclaim our definitions. Damn it! Like and not like by telling people, but like looking at them. Like when I talk about like the political spectrum scale, you got libertarian, authoritarian, left and right. There's another component that I've built in, but I'm really trying to build up what that is. And that's why I call myself, a liberal right-winger.
What we're up against is a lot of really certain egos, and we have to be willing to question our own assumptions or question our own beliefs. And if someone isn't willing to do that, then it's going to be really, really hard to get through to them. And we already have a lot of people that are kind of in that place to where they are super certain that they are right. And what we're talking about here probably seems insane or counterproductive at the least. And what we're calling for is not to take any one side. We're talking about taking the side of what is good for one and all and figuring out what that is together. And that's a different move. You know, we're looking for that win-win scenario. We're not looking for this lose-lose zero-sum game scenario that we find ourselves in. We know that everything that we're doing right now is just exacerbating the issue and making it worse. So I think the first thing we got to do is remember, oh, that's right. We're in the midst of a great ongoing miracle. We're in the middle of this thing that we call reality. No one knows for certain what it really is. Let's delve into that with a sense of wonder together, because what a wondrous thing that it is. And let's find our commonalities. Once again, let's find that sense of shared reverence for the great mystery that we find ourselves in. And let's begin to celebrate that again together and realize that it takes many minds to figure out how best for many minds to be together in the world. And none of us are going to have the solution. But together, we put our hearts and minds together, we might actually be able to find our way out of this mess. I'm just not sure that enough. I think we do. I am concerned that many people are so caught up in the ideological division that they're going to initially maybe refuse to question their own so closely held assumptions until things get even worse. But here we are trying to stave against that process, because I said this in a previous episode. I myself have been ideologically possessed. I don't know anyone alive today that hasn't been. And it's okay. It's part of the process. It's part of our growth. But look at the darkness that is facing us if we continue to let this division grow as it is, because we are being so pit against each other. And it does really, truly feel like a game of divide and conquer is being played against us by that inner greed and lust for power that use the word Moloch for, that has infested our fourth estate, the media, that has infested our own minds, that is blocking our hearts from seeing each other with eyes of love. I think we really need that back in this world. So,
well, and when it comes to the, unity end of things, we need to make sure that we're unifying in the right places and keeping separate in the right places as well. And, in the early part of the Bible, it has descriptions about how to do that. What is personal and private, and what is group together. And like one example for me would be, and this isn't a Bible example, this is a real world example, is a global unity. No, whoever's trying to sell you that has too much money and wants more control. We should have a unity of cause. This whole global thing where, we should just be this, equity mishmash. And it's evil because it's really just the top 0.001% just trying to do what they do. You know what I mean? But in that case, let's go national, or even state, or even county or town. You start there. Or start self, then move up to the next step, move up to the next step. We got to be real careful about not jumping steps ahead and trying to, save the whole world. Well, you can't even save yourself, man.
Yeah, that's right.
I can't even save myself, man. I can't even save my town. I can't,
that is a lie, is figure out how can we best help change the world. And, if we really seek and look at that deeply, we'll find that the only way to create a lasting revolution that does put us into a direction of betterment for one and all is one that realizes that we change the world from the inside out. We got to be that change we wish to see. And I know that sounds like a corny old adage, but it is so true. And the more you look at that one, the deeper that one gets. We are society. Society isn't just something that's separate from us. It is made up of us individuals. Individual shares the same root as the word indivisible, and you can't have an individual without having a community. You know, we are the products of the language that we speak that was invented before us. We're the products, and we share in mannerisms of those who came before us or helped raise us, or were part of content and media that we have consumed. We are made up of this world. We are a consequence of the earth and the sun and everything that we ingest and breathe in, and the impacts that we make on each other.
Yeah. Well, that's if you want to change society or you want to help your friends, you got to change yourself and help yourself first.
Yep.
You know, if like say an emergency disaster thing happens and your house catches on fire and your neighbor's house is on fire and you got a bunch of people in your house, you're not going to go run to your neighbor's house and be like, hey guys, are you all right?
Yep.
Well, you already got people in your house that you need to get out and you need to help. It's not to be that extreme, but that's kind of what it is.
That's a good point. And so if we want peace in this world, if we want a more peaceful world, we have to learn to be more peaceful ourselves and figure out how we can solve problems in a peaceful manner so much as is possible. And if we cannot embody a peaceful way of being to make our points, then we are kind of doomed from the start, I think. You know, we're pitting ourselves against each other so effectively right now that it's very easy to other one another and end up excusing or even being willing to do quite horrendous things to one another, you know. So here's a good point made by President John Adams
about our country and what our Constitution is and the necessity of having faith.
Yes. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. That is such a simple yet powerful point.
And you notice how this country and the idea of the Constitution is completely failing right now? It is completely failing. People are saying, well, we need, you know, these rights and those rights and trans rights and this, that, or the other. It's like, what are you talking about? It's the human rights that are ingrained. You have the same rights as everybody else.
We're talking about issues and events instead of talking about the way of being that gets us into the kinds of stasis that we want to be in.
Well, in our Constitution, like he said, was set up with the idea that, and I don't mean religious and, you know, like you're Catholic and you're worshiping Catholic or this, that, or the other. It's what religios, what religion does without the dogma. That has to still be there.
The connectivity.
That still, and
that's based around a shared sense of the sacred. We don't have to necessarily, I think, even agree on exactly what that sacred is composed of or how it exists, you know, from this religion to the other and have them competing against each other. We just have to see, as Martin Luther King saw, that all the world's great religious and spiritual traditions see love as the supreme unifying principle of life. We can get down to the roots of what make these different spiritual paths so profound for us. And I do believe that they help us because we end up congregating around that shared sense of the sacred. Not to, you know, be a broken record here, but I really want to keep hammering on that because that is, I think, the key. That is the root of the problem that we find ourselves in. We don't see that we are part of this one evolving thing anymore. We think that we are separate, and thus we are willing to commit violence against each other or be cruel and hateful and other one another in the name of what we believe.
Nothing is sacred, and how dare you say anything is sacred? Not even human life is sacred.
Well, then what's the point of arguing any point? You know, what's the point of supporting any cause if that's the truth, right?
And it gets there into the quote. So
if all truth is subjective, then why are you even upset about anything?
Yeah. So our Constitution was made only for the moral and religious people. Well, where do you get your morals from? Because secular morals suck. Hundreds of millions of people died.
Well, they're not compelling enough for us to be willing to abide by them.
It may be able to create an ethic that, like, you know, you can speak and talk about, and you can say, oh, well, everybody should be equal and free and yada, yada, yada.
Sure.
But it doesn't build a moral foundation of like, oh, well, no, this is definitely wrong.
And there's no
or
transcendent example of what that looks like.
Yeah.
You know, so we have a transcendent.
There's no shared there's no shared experience of the and an ethic is an individualistic thing. A moral is something that's actually grounded within the community.
Right. Right. And what compels you to follow that ethic?
Yeah.
In the world.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, we need a transcendent idea. We need a transcendent expression of the ultimate love to aspire towards and to measure ourselves by, something that is infinitely beyond us, that we'll never reach, so that we can always grow better and improve towards it in that direction.
Yeah.
Without that compelling reason to be good for one another and a deep belief of the abiding nature of love in this universe, there is no reason. I mean, you know, that's a perfectly justifiable survival technique or adaptation to steal, cheat, and lie. If there is no ultimate good, there must be an ultimate good, is what we're saying here. It can't just be something subjective. There must be an objective ultimate good.
Beyond ultimate, because like, you know, what we're calling the ultimate good, like, you know, God, the Godhead, the, you know, the whatever you want to call it, not a thing. It's before things and after all things.
Right, right.
So it's if it's a pointing finger, it's a thing that points further than you will ever be able to observe and you ever experience, and that's good. But what we really need to get back, because I really do think it's an evolutionary mechanism, as well as, you know, like, I do believe in God and believe in the advancement of the spirit, but on the most base level, the communal worship experience is something that helps humans. And this country, the United States, for our not United States viewers, this country is founded on the core principles of Christianity, whether you like it or not. And it actually has been a great success. Now, mind you, we've had our problems. Like every country before us, we had slavery. We fought a war to get rid of it. Tell me another country that fought a war to get rid of slavery.
Okay? It was the abolitionist movement here in the States that inspired Great Britain to outlaw slavery in the first place.
And we had sexism, and I don't mean like, you know, the naturalistic end of, you know, human organism animal fulfilling its sex binary in order to further it, but like we had, you know, like in the 1950s and 60s, you know, the business culture, hey toots, slap you on the butt kind of thing. We had that, and we got over it, and now it's all coming back, you know, and it's not coming back naturally. It's coming back because we have a deep lack of, you know, something happened where just like in the past with the secularization of the people, something happened with the country where we were building this community of people, and it doesn't matter what color you are, sex you are, you know, hey, you know, whoever you sleep with or whatever, you know, we can get along, and then bam, stab, 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 open up all those old wounds. And, you know, not to get all conspiracy theory people, but, you know, the ideological subversion, the people that weaseled them ways into the controlling structures of this country, whether it be media or government or education, it happened, and it happened recently. You know, it was happening before 2016, but it really like met its head there.
Yeah.
And it has kept going.
It's
and
continued to ramp up exponentially.
So we need to ramp up our own
finding our way back home.
Yeah,
really, right?
Not a resistance, but finding your way back home. That's a good way to put it.
With one another,
naturally
you know?
coming back to what was actually good parts that we're
coming
working
back home
on.
to the hearts of one another, seeing the hearts of one another once again. Because what DJ is saying there about how this was a nation founded with Christian values is the gift that Christianity gave the world was this idea that there is something sacred. There's an element of the divine in every human being. So everybody gets a fair trial. Even if we know this guy is almost certainly the murderer because he's hurt people in the past and he's got this record, you still get a fair shot, and you still get a fair punishment. We are not trying to be torturous, cruel, and evil. If we're trying to get rid of evil in the world, then we want to find a way to be fair and just. So this idea of justice,
so we even
is something that came
evil
from that spiritual
justly.
tradition called Christianity, which is okay. Christianity is certainly a mixed bag with its own cultural baggage, but what that guy Christ himself was up to,
he made the person
pretty rad.
He made persons out of the unpersonal. He made
stuck
sacred
up for the
individuals
poor,
out of people who
you know?
were just thought of as scum.
The poor are equal to the rich,
and
you know, the
not
rich
to be
are going to
that guy,
have an even harder time of getting into heaven.
But not to be that guy, but no other religion did that. or
man,
has
he turned the
done
world
that since
upside
then.
down.
That's what makes Christianity unique, and why the United States, United States, in my opinion, is the best country in the world, and if we fall, y'all are screwed. And I'm going to say that outright. That's not an egotistical thing. That's just a fact. And I think part of that
Because
is the
we're so
idea
powerful.
of realizing everybody as a person. Whether you're the person that has all the things or none of the things, whether you're a person that has all the power or none of the power, whether you're a person that is smart or not smart,
Even
whether you're a kind
deeper.
person or a mean person, you are still a person.
Yeah, even deeper than
Yeah.
that. The person matters because it is a spiritual being. It is something that comes from this ineffable source. We all come from this same thing. And that means that that mystery of this existence is something that dwells and lives through every single one of us.
Well, and if we don't keep that going, we're screwed. Like globally,
No.
we're screwed
Yeah,
because
then we're willing to hurt each other. Then
Well,
we're willing to enact violence on behalf
be
of our
like,
beliefs
you're
or
not-
justify the violence of others.
you're not a person, you're a number.
And we're too
Or
powerful
you're,
now.
well, look what this is easy to say, but because we all have it in our memory or our cultural memory. Look what the Nazis did with the Jews. You're not a person, you're a number. But also you could look what, communist China does. You're not a person, you're just an allotment of resource.
Mm-hmm.
And if you speak up, well, that just get rid of you because you're a problem now. You're not a person.
Yeah.
You're a problem.
Yeah.
And that's why it's really important. Like one of the best things the West ever did was really like enshrine, and I got to give it to the English common law here, is enshrine personhood. And okay, well, you're innocent until proven guilty because you're a person and you deserve that, even if you're an evil person. Still, the base. So it's setting a really good, solid baseline for
how to treat one another.
civilization. Now
Yeah.
it always needs improvement because if anything stays the same too
Right.
long, it breaks apart and it degrades.
Right.
You gotta keep repairing your house to keep it up.
Right.
But still, let's not destroy the person. Let's get back to personhood.
Well, let's also keep in mind that we were able to get away with using violence to solve our problems for eons because we were not as powerful as we are now. We are now so technologically powerful that we can destroy this miracle of humanity.
Yep.
And some people are so nihilistic that they'll say, well, hey, we've screwed up this earth so bad that, we deserve that and let the earth have a chance without us. But we are Earth. We are Earthlings. We are extensions of this living planet that have become self-aware and self-reflective. And we can also be the great stewards of this planet that I believe we have that great potential for. And, who else is going to save all those cute little animals from the next asteroid but the humans? We actually do have the capacity to be wonderful, beautiful stewards. And so there are enough, I think, saving graces in our species to justify, this argument that we should try and stick around and better ourselves. And I don't know. I mean, I just see that we've gotten so hopelessly nihilistic. We're so disconnected from a sense of the sacred that we're hopeless and we're angry and we're vengeful and we're just playing a blame game. And we think that we can change this world by affecting the outer, by hacking at limbs, by treating the symptoms rather than dealing with the root. But the root is right here within each one of us. And if only we were courageous enough and willing enough and loving enough to face the inconsistencies within our own selves rather than just projecting them onto the world around us and thinking that the problems are only caused by others, by those things out there.
That's Moloch, right?
Moloch.
And you got to sacrifice your innocence. You got an innocent person within yourself. You must sacrifice to Moloch. And if you're not strong enough to directly sacrifice yourself, you have to sacrifice somebody else. That's why we make straw men and we try to burn them down because that's the easiest way to sacrifice another person, Moloch.
But it's too dangerous now for us to keep up that game.
Oh, no.
We are too powerful. The weapons, beyond just nukes, but chemical warfare, AI.
Well, imagine if the AI grows up as cynical as we are. Yeah, of course people think we're screwed.
Yeah. Let's jump on over because now we're going to get into the subject we've been aiming at this entire episode is how do we deal with current events and make meaning of them. And the major current event right now that's happened in this past week was the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. And Moloch in media has certainly exacerbated the division in our culture. It seems itself to be very close to the root cause of the division. It certainly amped it up.
Yeah, and this is our, our, what did you call it, our fourth estate?
Yeah, the fourth estate. It's like the fourth branch of government.
Yeah,
is
we're
the media, and we've lost track of the art of journalism.
Well, so for our friends that are kind of not in the know, that only passively consume news media, and I get it, like, it sucks, so why watch it? When you hear somebody who's a newsie, whether they're conservative or not, and they're talking about, like, this assassination attempt was years of terrible rhetoric coming out of the media and coming out of the establishment over and over and over again, programming people into this mindset. And all it takes is one person out of hundreds of millions to snap seeing all this. So you don't have to just program one person, you just scatter it over the top, and eventually one person will. So that's
and this has happened on the right and the left of the mainstream legacy media.
So the argument that the media and the establishment media, or legacy, or whatever you want to call it, is really responsible for this.
Mm-hmm.
This is from DC Shorts. Whether you like them or not, they got a good compilation of media clips that, frankly, it's not even close to all of it. It's very small amount. But this is what has led up to this point. So we're before July 13th, 2024. Get it.
Let's go.
His rhetoric is really getting dangerous. That man cannot see public office again. He is not only unfit, he is destructive to our democracy, and he has to be eliminated.
And the donor class can't just sit back on the sidelines and say, oh, well, don't worry, this will all work itself out. They're still going to have to go out and put a bullet in Donald Trump.
Maybe Donald Trump will go away. Maybe he'll go to jail. Maybe he will die. Not to be too morbid, but maybe, he's not a young man.
I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Trump is a threat to this nation.
This occupant of the Oval Office poses a clear and present danger to our future, to our democracy.
What was at stake tonight and this week, whether we will be a democracy in the future, whether our children will be arrested and conceivably killed.
It's an actor dressed to look just like President Donald Trump as he's assassinated on stage. Look as his character is stabbed to death. It's a staging of Shakespeare's Julius Caesar that is outraging many. The controversial production is taking place here in New York City's Central Park. The staging is being seen as a direct jab at Trump.
Yes, I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. MAGA Republicans do not respect the Constitution. They do not believe in the rule of law. They do not recognize the will of the people.
They voted for Trump in 20. They knew exactly what they were doing. If they vote for Donald Trump in 2024, they're knowingly voting for a fascist. They're voting for a racist. They're voting for somebody that wants to put this country 200 years in the back.
The Republicans, in terms of their numbers, are the largest authoritarian force the world over.
In Mein Kampf, Hitler wrote, "The Jew," and I'm quoting him here, "poisons the blood of others." Trump has used that line before and other phrases like it that echo Nazi rhetoric.
A lot of people have tried to draw similarities between Mussolini and Hitler and the use of the terminology like vermin and the drive that those men had towards autocracy and dictatorship. The difference, though, I think makes Donald Trump even more dangerous, and that is he has no philosophy he believes in.
Osama bin Laden is, as a person, is far more understandable to me and far less reprehensible personally, psychologically, than Trump.
He's going to force prosecutors to arrest political enemies. He's going to execute generals that don't follow his commands. He's able to use SEAL Team 6 to execute political opponents, and he says you can't arrest me for that. You can go down the list. He's going to be a dictator from day one. He's going to terminate the Constitution.
I think that, look, I believe that the president is literally an existential threat. This is really dangerous stuff.
Because Donald Trump is such an authoritarian and autocrat, we have to win this election. This is not a normal election where you want to win. If you don't, you cooperate and do the best you can for the country and hope to win the next time. This is something that is undermining our democracy, and he must be stopped. He cannot be president.
I think he's a fascist and a bigot, but
those are his good points.
Those are his good points. Exactly.
The Washington Post headline screams, if Trump is convicted, Secret Service protection may be obstacle to imprisonment. I thank you for your legislation. I have been saying for some time that any former president or federal official who has this type of protection and some of the other benefits of being a former member of office, all of that should go away.
It causes people to think, well, gosh, if you're a Trump supporter and you see Marjorie Taylor Greene or whoever saying they were ready to assassinate Donald Trump, it's nonsense. And kind of the final point, Nicole, you know who engages in sort of flowery, hyperbolic accusations of opponents trying to assassinate them? Authoritarians do that around the world. It is common practice, if you
they try
tune
to
into the sort of opponents of Kim Jong-un or the opponents of Saddam Hussein or whoever it is, there's this vitriolic accusations that the other side is trying to kill them. That's the sort of behavior that goes on around authoritarians. And so that's what we're seeing. It is putting agents, unfortunately, at danger. And I really, really hope that it gets nipped in the bud soon.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so.
Mr. Chairman, I ask for.
So yeah, hello pot, I'm kettle, or hello kettle, I'm pot. You see all this stuff, and they're just calling him a dictator and this, that, or the other, this, and you're gonna arrest his political enemies and stuff. This is what they were doing first off, and that's also Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals. Accuse the other person of doing what you're doing.
So the Democratic establishment, the neoliberal establishment, which is totally infiltrated by corporate moneyed power interests
and Soviet influence.
Certainly is a facsimile of what it once was. And we know that both sides of our government are corrupted. Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump both ran on draining the swamp, i.e. getting rid of the corporate influence, the lobbyists over our representatives in Congress, because our entire government is quite infiltrated with money and these powers that have their own interests. These multinational corporations that are now more powerful than whole nations when they band together, they are actually able to influence our nation. So I think both people on the left and the right see that there is corruption in our government and in our media, and that it is super sensationalized nowadays, and it is doing very much to pit us against each other. I certainly don't believe, because I've met so many Trump supporters and I've viewed so many on various YouTube channels. I know people in my own life that certainly don't match the stereotype of authoritarians, of people that are interested in killing or doing off with those that they are, not party with and all that. It's
people who are against you.
This is such a cruel
That's not the way to go. You don't win as soon as one person dies, you've lost the battle. So that's
But this stereotype of all Trump supporters is racist.
Well, I'm a Trump supporter, and I really don't care what color you are. You're an asshole. You're an asshole. Really. And I started out not liking the dude. Then I did my research and I looked. I'm like, oh, I was being lied to. Crap.
Yeah, and that's why we're seeing a lot of people in the Latino and the Black community starting to show support for Trump. People don't like being lied to. And you don't have to like the guy, and he might very well be, and he appears to me to be a quite a narcissistic blowhard in many respects.
He definitely is.
I don't think that he's a great example of a statesman in his style of rhetoric oftentimes. But he is certainly not the giant monster that they've made him out to be, and that the image of Donald Trump has been magnified so many times over into something that is completely obscene and outside the realm of reality. And the same goes for the supporters. We are really badly being pitted against each other, guys.
Well,
you got to look at what's out there. You got to take it and look at what you're afraid to look at and find out, is he really what he's been made out to be? Are his supporters really what they've been made out to be? Because I don't think that is the case by any means.
Well, and so the figure that is Trump or MAGA or Trump supporters or whatever you want to call it has had to be inflated to such a degree to hide the real monsters in the muck behind it that don't want the light of day. And, who is they, though? It's like, I'm not going to say, you can say it's the Democrats. You can say it's Republicans. You can say it's the establishment shills on both sides. You can say whatever it is. But either way, this was an inflation of a persona to hide something. And then, once, originally this was supposed to be like, make Donald Trump up to be this, buffoonery, whatever, so Hillary can get in. And then, people prefer the baboon to the terrible freaking witch, nasty, horrible,
so now
awful
make him out
person that
into
is Hillary.
a monster and Hitler-esque.
And not to be that guy, but Hillary, you look up the Clinton Foundation, the money they stole from, just pretty much everybody they try to help.
Yeah, how did so many people get fooled into supporting the Democrat establishment? And because I have no problem with Democrats in general,
because
or Republicans.
Democrats, their platform is, in order to help the world, we're going to give you something.
The leaders of these parties are hopelessly corrupt. I think that's got to be clear.
Well, sure, and actually, I would have to say the vast majority of Republicans are also terribly corrupt as well.
Certainly, in Congress, yeah. And that's why people were looking for
Congress,
an outsider.
the Senate,
people were looking at
guys.
populist outsiders like Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump for a reason, because they no longer trust the party establishment.
Well, so this is what I think happened. So the Democratic Party end of the discussion is, we have problems. In order to fix those problems, we're going to give you something, which really appeals to the sloth nature of human beings. It's like, well, cool. Yeah, I could use that extra $3,000, or I could,
we're going to solve the problem for you. Here's the solution.
Yeah, okay, nanny state will do it for me. That's fine. Whereas the Republicans are like, we're just going to get out of your way and allow you to do it for yourself. And there was a shift, like the 90s were very consumeristic and and then we'll look into the 2000s. Now you don't have to even go out to get your own fast food. Pay a little extra money and somebody will drive it right to your house. Uber Eats or whatever
and
it is.
What we need is something in the middle where
I
society learns how to serve
I think that's how
its citizens, and citizens learn how to empower themselves.
Well, and I think that tendency for slothness versus being left alone, and sometimes to the detriment of you. We do have to look after each other, but that's what made the Democratic Party since the 60s get the power it has, because it's like, we will help you. We will help you. And frankly, I don't want you to help me. I want you to get the hell out of the way. Stop hurting me. That's kind of why, I'm, a right-wing liberal, because I'm like, just get the hell out of my way.
Signaling that they were going to help the minorities that the Republican Party had traditionally been standing for.
And minorities and poors, or whatever the thing is.
The Republican and the Democrats, they switch roles every generation or so, and we've seen that happen over time. The KKK was founded under Democrats, by Democrats.
The
it
core
was the Republicans that gave rights and freedoms to slaves.
The core fundamental of what the Republican Party versus the Democratic Party has been more state power or less state power.
Right.
So, do you want a collective representation to inflict itself on your life, or do you want to be left alone, and sometimes left alone to the point where you just die between the cracks? Those are the two extremes. I'm making extremes of it, but it's like, do you want the collective to give you everything, or do you want to be left alone at the potential of being left alone to die by yourself?
And that's a good way to put it, because we don't want to be led by either one of these two parties. We need to see that the left and the right wings of America are what make the bird fly, and that we have to see each other as partners in seeing the gaps where the other side is missing something. We got to pick up where each other leave
Well, it's
off.
like a good opponent process,
It's
like
an
within
opponent
your
process.
body.
That's right.
Like sometimes you have to be elevated, and sometimes you really need to be brought down, and you don't need to be brought down when you need to be elevated. So there has to be proper communication between the two mechanisms that.
Because you'll find most Americans are actually registered independents. The majority of us are independent-minded, and we are liberal on some issues. We're conservative on other issues, and that's natural. And so, we've got to stop demonizing one another, in short. Now let's, speaking of demonizing.
Yeah, so for those who don't know Destiny, Destiny is a common figure within the independent media. He is a unabashed leftist liberal. He calls himself the omni-liberal. He used to be somewhat reasonable. I think he's personally, I think he's a sophist, and I think he's full of crap with everything, but that's just me personally. But now, after this attempt, like, he was a reasonable leftist. Like, he could make his argument. He could talk to a conservative. And they could have, a good conversation. He wasn't overly, antagonistic. He was antagonistic in some ways, but so am I. So, like, I can't judge on that. But this take, as far as,
this
like,
take is insane,
like, wishing death upon people that you don't know and not realizing that, like, whether you like Trump or not, what happened, if it would have gone just a few inches the other way, we would have been in total war all around the world. Everything we know would collapse. And who's Franz Ferdinand, right? Who's Franz Ferdinand?
I think the whole world
and
dodged.
that caused World War One.
Yeah.
Everybody in the world knows who Trump
Great
is.
point, man.
You really think that this wouldn't have caused the end, the end of what we know now and a new horror that is way worse than World War II?
Could well have triggered a domino effect.
And then also the innocent people, the innocent person that didn't deserve to be killed, or the other people that were injured during this. So we'll go on and show you.
Yeah,
I'm
let's
getting a little
just see
ahead
what
of myself,
Destiny had to say about the Trump assassination. Let's jump on over here and see.
The dude.
So.
It. The dude. The firefighter guy. Trump. The people that support him. I just want you to know, okay? Just in case you're confused or it seems like I'm, whatever. If one of you were in the crowd and you're a conservative fan of mine, and
I just want you to know that if you think like this.
Oh yeah. Okay. So that was.
It. The dude. The firefighter guy. Trump.
Okay, what is he saying here? He is saying,
so
F Trump, F the people that support him, F the firefighter that got shot and killed that was shielding his daughter and his wife. Do you guys even know about that?
Yeah.
Do you know the story of that firefighter? And did you see the letter that his daughter wrote after the fact? I wish I'd brought that up and saved that because that was something powerful. But yeah, let's let him go on here, and then we're going to see the commentary on this. And I really appreciate what this young gentleman had to say about what Destiny is saying here.
Support him. I just want you to know, okay? Just in case you're confused or it seems like I'm, whatever. If one of you were in the crowd and you're a conservative fan of mine, and
I just want you to know that if you think like this, you are a piece of garbage. If you are wishing death on somebody because they have a different set of ideas than you, because they have a different political ideology than you, then you are actually the problem. I'm an independent leftist, and I would never celebrate someone getting killed in the crossfire solely because of who they support. This is once again proof that it's not Trump supporters who are the enemy of the people. It's actually people like Destiny, if we're going to be real about it.
Yeah.
That man is a piece of human garbage. He isn't leftist. I wouldn't even call him a liberal. He's just garbage.
So I'm not the fan of calling him garbage. I think that that's pretty divisive itself. But I really appreciate that this is somebody that identifies with the other side of Trump supporters and still sees the insanity and the cruelty of what Destiny is actually trying to say here.
And not defending the term garbage, but as far as a symbol, what is garbage? It is something that was once useful that is no longer useful, that you set aside to be removed later.
Yeah, I don't see Destiny as separate from us, though, so I'm not willing to.
Well, the problem is whether you want to be
man.
Separate or not, he has separated himself.
Sure.
And that's Christian Murty talked about. But this is the first act, the first act of violence, or not the first act, but a deep act of violence is when you separate yourself from somebody else. And having this type of thing, he has separated himself, and he's going to rot for it.
Yes.
And so I don't think
you
should call people garbage.
But to relink it, yeah, I'm with you there, because to relink it, he is a fellow human being. Destiny, I disagree with the dude here.
I think he's evil, frankly.
Well, I think he's being evil.
Yeah.
I don't think that he is inherently evil. I think that he is being evil because he's ideologically captured, evil, and that's Moloch coming through him. But yeah, I don't think he's garbage, but I do appreciate this gentleman's perspective. I called him a young gentleman, and he's got gray in his beard, but he sounds young, and he makes a valid point, and I really appreciate when one is willing to call out their own side.
Yeah.
Because that is how we help reorient ourselves You know, as people, we need to be able to call out the inconsistencies. You know, if it's wrong for people to use violence to achieve their ends, then what Destiny is trying to defend here or justify here is...
Well, and he goes way further. Like, so there's a lot more. Like, there, you know how Twitter wars and all that stuff go, and there was way more stuff going in. But you know, I'm sorry to say that he is evil. It's much like, you know, when Jesus says, "I am the way." By walking the way you are with Christ, by walking evil, you are evil. You can turn away from evil, but at this point, he's evil. And you know, you see the people in the media saying all this stuff and pushing people. They are evil too by their deeds. You know, because you should be judged, you know, by what you do and what your merit is. Instead of this, oh well, I'm innocent because I'm this category, or you're evil, or you're guilty because of this category. It's like, no, what makes you evil or innocent by what you do and how you handle. If you want to go from evil to good, you got to do some repenting. You got to do some self-searching. You got to move through that. You have to open yourself up to your community and have them judge you and bare your soul to them.
Yeah, I saw a video where Destiny was on a panel on Piers Morgan, and he was debating with Dave Rubin and others about, you know, what he said here in this video that we just showed you all. And he's continuing to defend what he said rather than doing that soul searching that DJ's talking about and admitting that, yeah, maybe it was wrong of me to put it that way. Yeah, you know, well, to gleefully celebrate the death of those with whom you disagree, and the actual death of that firefighter.
And frankly,
who was a hero in that moment is just disgusting. You know, there's a lot of really good people who like Donald Trump that are not evil or the monsters that we've made them out to be. We got to stop slinging these cruel terms back and forth. Snowflake, garbage, whatever the term is. We are in a trap. We are in a zero-sum game trap when we keep seeing each other as so separate as to be able to demean each other using terms like this, because we're not recognizing that we ourselves have been that thing that we see as disgusting before. We all are subject to fallibility. We all make mistakes. We all err in our ways. So, you know, I absolutely disagree with Destiny's points here, and I greatly appreciate what the gentleman said that we just shared.
And in defense, not defense, is, you know, yeah, he's going through some crap. You know, he lost his wife because, well, decision made and all this stuff. And this is actually pretty common. Like, you know, Mark Hamill said some crappy crap. A bunch of other celebrities that, like, their lives are falling apart because they're no longer relevant, or this, that, or the other. It's all falling apart. And, you know, when I feel like I'm falling apart, I get very bitter as well. So I can see that. But it doesn't excuse it.
It doesn't excuse it, but it gives us an explanation.
There's
if we
reasons,
recognize,
but never excuses.
Yeah, no, if we can recognize that we're all the subject of conditioning that essentially begins at birth, then we can understand how people can be so easily ideologically trapped and captured, and we can have compassion for those with whom we disagree. We can have love and care for even those with whom we vehemently disagree, such as the point that Destiny made there in that short. So now we're going to look at more about how the media and our leaders have inflamed and potentially created the very situation we find ourselves in.
Our potato in chief.
This is a video where Biden talks about how he did use that term bullseye, put a bullseye on Trump, and how that could be mistaken. Jump on over here now. Check out this video from the...
Let's talk about the conversation this has started, and it's really about language, what we say out loud and the consequences of those. You called your opponent an existential threat. On a call a week ago, you said it's time to put Trump in the bullseye. There's some dispute about the context, but I think you appreciate that.
I didn't say crosshairs. I was talking about focus on. Look, the truth of the matter was, what I guess I was talking about at the time was, there was very little focus on Trump's agenda.
Yeah, the term was bullseye.
It was a mistake to use the word. I didn't say crosshairs. I meant bullseye. I meant focus on him. Focus on what he's doing. Focus on on his policies. Focus on the number of
80
lies he
million
told in
Americans
the
voted for
debate.
this.
Focus. I mean, there's a whole range of things that, look, I'm not the guy that said, I want to be a dictator on day one. I'm not the guy that refused to accept the outcome of the election. I'm not the guy who said that one accept the outcome of this election automatically.
He accepted
You can't
the outcome of the last one.
only love your country when you win. And so the focus was on what he's saying, and I mean the idea.
But have you taken a...
Obviously, a poor choice of words. There's not
He didn't
ever
write
a
that- he didn't write
circumstance
that
where
crap.
that is appropriate to say. There's not one.
But you know he didn't tweet that. That was, you know, one of his one of his handlers' underlings that put that stuff up there.
Right.
You know, so it's like he was just like,
Yeah. What's
"No."
the difference between bullseye and crosshair anyway? It still has the same connotation.
So the problem I have isn't bullseye or crosshair, but he continued to go on this dictator on day one. It's like, well, okay, for my liberal friends that don't watch this, go watch it. He was talking tongue in cheek. It's like, yeah, maybe on day one, you know, where I'll, you know, do this thing and this thing that everybody, whether they're Republican or Democrat or not, are just kind of pissed off about. It's like the bloodbath thing. He was actually talking about economic bloodbath.
But the Moloch media is so good at clipping out things to make them appear a certain way, and then everyone just believes it, and they refuse to question that belief.
Well,
you don't have to like Trump to be able to see through this. You don't have to. Like, just like the gentleman that we just showed calling out Destiny, you can be someone that leans left and still see how disgusting that is. That is a garbage statement to say. And, you know, I don't like to term the individual humans as garbage themselves because I know where that leads ultimately, but we can at least see the statement
garbage
as garbage.
That sentiment, that mindset is definitely garbage and should be tossed.
Real, man. 100%.
He should go ahead and toss that mentality out of his head.
Yeah. So let's see more of how people are viewing this event, because, you know, I'm sure all of you out there are seeing on your social media people like, how could you miss saying things like that? Being upset that Trump wasn't actually, that the assassination attempt was unsuccessful.
And they're supposed to be the tolerant types too.
Yeah. So we're going to see supporters of Donald Trump here, and we're going to see people that absolutely hate and abhor Donald Trump here speaking their minds. To James Klug, he does some great videos. Check him out as well. Jump on over, guys. And remember, the links to all of these videos are in the description if you'd like to go deeper. Here we go. Jumping on over.
Donald Trump almost got assassinated. What do you think?
Yeah, it's very scary, very scary. I think it's awful for America what happened.
Yeah,
he's the only man who can change this country.
That was like a powerful moment after he got shot. Bro got shot in the ear. Yeah. And he like, I don't know, he showed everyone that he's strong and stuff, so.
He got hit and then he started touching it after, but.
You talking about like the way he just got right back up like a gangster?
I don't even know though, that was crazy to be honest, but hell yeah.
Biden is toast. Yeah. I'll tell you one thing, I'm gonna be voting Trump 2024.
These are the normal people, you know, just the.
What does it say?
Trump
What was
for
your
us
thoughts
on
about
his
the
license
assassination
plate.
attempt?
They missed.
They missed.
They missed.
do you
he should have died. He's not good for this country, and he never will be.
Wow.
Ever. He's the worst person that could be ever in politics.
It's a false flag.
False flag.
Yeah, false flag.
Somebody died and 2 people injured. What do you think about that?
False flag.
False flag.
I thought it was magnificently staged. It was professionally done. It almost looked real.
Wait. Staged by who?
Oh, by Mr. Trump, of course.
I think this whole thing is staged.
You think it was staged?
Yeah.
It depends on everybody's view. Yeah.
View of the assassination attempt? What do you think? Does it kind of depend on where you're standing, whether or not you agree with the assassination attempt or disagree with it?
I just don't see that being the truth, but that's my. I'd rather just not make any comment.
Really quick, what are you talking about the truth? What do you mean? Oh, you just don't believe it was an assassination attempt?
No.
Please don't.
No.
We're so anti-Trump. I don't even want to.
Was it a bad thing though? Was it a bad thing? Would you condemn it?
Oh, that he got shot? Of course.
Yeah, right.
Of course, you don't do that.
That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, that's really bad. Yeah, exactly. You don't do that. Was it staged? Probably.
Staged?
Yeah.
Okay, so you think Trump maybe staged a fake assassination for support? Okay. And that resulted in somebody dying and other people being critically injured?
I haven't seen the news today. I'm not here for the news. I haven't seen anything. I'm on vacation.
You guys want to weigh in? What do you think about it?
Very upsetting.
Very upsetting. What do you think, sir?
Same upsetting. Shouldn't be done. Shouldn't have happened.
Poor Trump.
Absolutely.
He doesn't deserve that. You know, there's no place for it here. It's just complete shock.
It's horrific. Yeah, there should be no violence on any party, any side. So I'm not a Trump voter, but violence is not an option.
Well, has that just strengthened your support for the man?
I think all across the United States, just like when it happened to President Reagan,
there was a surge of feelings for him.
Yeah, 1981 that happened.
Yes, and I think similar thing is going to happen with Trump.
It doesn't matter. Like, I was at the beach yesterday.
Right.
That happened. I'm going to go on with the rest of my life, politically wise. Like, it doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect, you know, my local government as much.
I guess it kind of seemed like it was coming. Like, there just seems to be a lot of animosity from one side more than the other that would indicate this kind of thing happening.
So you're disappointed that the shooter missed Donald Trump?
100%. 100%. No, well, nothing. He should have died. She doesn't like him as much as I do, but she's a little more sympathetic to people dying.
Do you think that the shooter was justified?
He did what he wanted to do.
Do you think it was justified? Like, do you think
In
he
his eyes, I'm sure it was. But you know what? Since he missed, I can guarantee you there's going to be 100 people that are going to try to not miss.
Are you going to try?
Would you support that?
100%. He doesn't need to live. He doesn't need to be a president.
Did you see the video?
I saw the video, and
What do you think about the video?
This is where we're
it's
at.
shocking. To actually see the bullet going back, and yeah, thank God he wasn't hurt.
I started crying. It's terrible.
I don't think there's anyone around here that hasn't seen it. Saw him giving his fist.
What'd you feel in that moment?
More support for him.
You see that he got back up, raised his fist. I want your opinion on this Time magazine cover right here. I want your thoughts on this cover.
That is going to be history. That is going to be on everything for a long time.
I think it's amazing.
Yeah, I think it won him the election. Hell yeah, that goes hard. Pretty badass, dude. I've seen some people put it on like weed already, on weed packages. Someone got a tattoo. So
it's the MAGA Kush?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just alive in it. I'm just experiencing it. I mean, it's pretty punk rock, yeah.
Yeah, it's an epic photo.
That guy
That is my favorite picture of all of them. That's my favorite right there.
I don't know, it looks like power to me. It looks like maybe a former president coming back, you know?
You guys, let's take a few moments to talk about my good friend.
So
a mix
of
normal
he
people.
might be. We're not here for that, though.
No, sorry,
we're really not.
I shouldn't have called him that, but okay, I want to explain that
This
type
goes
of
to the heart of the
mentality.
point that-
That's hold on, real quick. I shouldn't have called him beta, but that standoff. Well, you know, it's not going to affect me and whatever. That's what we're getting at earlier, and that is participating evil too. How hard is it to say, like, yeah, it was
but
wrong?
This is how easy Moloch takes us
Yeah,
over.
well.
We think that we're separate from these people. We're not. We are just this one thing that is alive and somehow talking to itself. Whatever the universe is that somehow births living planets, in perhaps very rare cases, that somehow turn into things like us that are in the midst of these kinds of situations, that find ourselves having these kinds of conversations. We are this one thing that is outgrowing into a billion expressions of life at once, yet we are still the same one thing.
Yeah, but
and,
you know,
and
you should get
that
up
is
and, you
that
should,
is the orientation that I believe that Christ and Buddha lived from, and that is what we have to try and live by. What would Jesus do? What would Jesus say? What would Buddha do?
Sometimes
What would
flip
Buddha
over
say?
a table and tell people what you're doing is wrong too. And actually, this is something I've been thinking about for a while. With
But he did that like one time in his life.
But there was
you know?
more times where he spoke with some real like severe like.
Sure,
no.
but he was not trying to insult or think of those as that
No,
with whom
and
he disagreed
and
as
I'm
separate
not, I'm
from
not
him.
saying that
and,
at
and those
all.
are also teaching stories.
And
that are
I'm
in the
not
Bible.
saying that at all. What I am saying though is the problem with modern Christianity in the United States. We don't stand up for what we believe in, and we say, "Oh well, it doesn't bother me. You do you, and you do that." And I'm not saying get in people's faces and be rude, but you gotta, actually be like, "Well, no, that's wrong." Say, "Destiny, I think you're wrong," and then tell people it's like,
Sure.
"Look." Wishing like that one guy is
But
like,
falling
oh, no,
into the trap of calling each other names is
well,
juvenile. We don't need to play in that game.
Unless you want to be
We need to
humorous about
transcend
it.
that.
We should all be humorous again. And, this is why we like, Kill Tony, or, I like occasionally watching Jesse Lee Peterson, and he's just way the hell out there and just, get.
But it's being done in jest.
Yeah, and that's kind of when I called him a beta. That was kind of in jest. But also we need to call out like that whole idea of, don't want to, get involved and stuff like that. It's like, well, we're not in the good times of humanity. We're not like, yes, there's a lot of good things. We have the technology and stuff, but we're on the edge. So you need to really work on yourself and work with each other and build your communities and just,
So
encourage people to be all right with being like, hey, yeah, that was wrong. Or even, hey, yeah, get on them, should have hit him next time. Be open and honest about it, about all of it, so we know. Because there's too much confusion right now of people not wanting to be involved at all.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, in the
Say what
United
you
States, most people don't vote, don't do anything, don't even talk about politics. You can't go out to the pub and talk about it. You can't go, no, you got to stay quiet and stay afraid. And forgive me for being angry about this, but I'm watching the destruction of my home,
of our civilization,
by people who hate this, and then facilitated by people who don't want to be bothered. know what I mean? And I can see on the left when they say your silence is violence. That's the core they're talking about. They're perverting it, of course. That's what they're talking about. Is if you don't stand up for yourself and stand up for your family and stand up for your community, it's kind of your fault when the hordes come in and burn down your
Well, I make this point a lot because we do live in a system of self-governance where we are supposed to watch our representatives like hawks.
Yep.
And that does include the fourth estate, our media as well, because they are supposed to be representing us as well in their capacity and telling us the truth in as objective a fashion as they can. And we see that they have not been doing that. And then when it comes to our fellows that are disinterested in politics, which is our own family, our own friends, co-workers, and whenever you bring up something political, you get a lot of turned up noses or people that are just turned off from it, not interested at all. That's a sign of our decline, because you don't have to like politics to follow politics. It's actually our duty in a system of self-governance. We have this great opportunity to get to run our own government ourselves if we are mature and wise enough to pull it off. And when we are no longer paying attention, then it goes to crap. And that's just a simple truth. We have to actually engage in the politics of our day. We just have to do so with a sense of, we have to be well-meaning about it. We have to be involving ourselves in a way that is coming from a place of care. Is the core of it.
Have to know what that care is.
We're so easily triggered into places of fear, but are we seeing through eyes of love or eyes of fear? If we're in the eyes of love, then we're going to continue to fragment, divide, and break apart. If we can see through the eyes of love rather than the eyes of fear, then we can see that we truly are just this one thing evolving, unraveling itself out here into the cosmos, and we get to take part in the co-creation of this great miracle and the telling of this great story of humanity. So
it's not going to be puppy dogs and rainbows and all goodness either. It's going to be gritty. It's going to be ugly.
Oh, for sure.
And with the way things are going right now, there's going to be some evil people that want to make it bloody too. And it probably is going to get there as well. Well, it already is there in the world. How many wars are going around where everybody's just killing each other and trying to involve in other people and killing each other? In this country, how many people are just killing each other because you disrespected me, or because you slapped my sister, or because of whatever it is? It's like, it's not easy to do good. It's not easy to have faith.
We have to turn the flames down somehow. And like you say, it's not easy to have faith, but we have to have faith in one another, in better angels of our nature, because we do indeed have the capacity to destroy ourselves as a species now and take much of this planet along with us. We are too powerful now to play this game anymore. We have to very quickly and wisen ourselves and grow up as a species if we're going to be able to responsibly wield the powers that we have now today. Because we have, like Daniel Schmachtenberger has said, we have the power of gods without the wisdom of gods.
Yeah.
And we are in grave danger of destroying ourselves and the miracle of humanity, or at least destroying what good this civilization that we've developed has brought us, because we see some evil in it. And the evil is in our systems of governance, because we ourselves have the potential for evil within us. And so we're not going to solve the problem by creating a new government. We're not going to, without having changed within, to be able to live up to and uphold the values of that new system. We're not going to be able to make this existing one work nearly as well as it could without ourselves being able to live up to and uphold the values that we subscribe to and that we are, intending for others to live by. We can't do it by force. We can't do it by othering one another. We can't do it by dividing and fragmenting and breaking apart from one another, as we are being so tooled to do. We're playing into this game of divide and conquer over and over and over again. It's so easy to fall into that Moloch trap, and that's it. Let's just stop this playing into this divide and conquer methodology. Let's see behind the curtain and see the Wizard of Oz that is there manipulating us all. And let's track it down and find that it is the inherent evil of man that is allowing all of this manipulation to go on. And, it wouldn't work. The elites, the oligarchs, the filthy rich multinational corporatists who have banded together to infiltrate our systems of governance the world over from within.
You
and
mean
destroy
the UN and the WEF and BlackRock?
Yes.
Yeah, all them.
Yes, all of these guys that have been meddling in the free societies around the world are turning them in on themselves, causing us to destroy ourselves from within, in perhaps the name of some kind of corporate totalitarian technocratic dictatorship. And
Communifascism. Communism and fascism all mixed together. Socialism, we'll just say so. That the corporate socialists, where you put the corporate in charge of the societies.
Yeah, because of the top 100 economies on the planet, this was a statistic I picked up back in the 90s. Of the top 100 economies on the planet, the top 51 are actually corporations. The bottom 49 are nations. These conglomerates
California
have such power to influence our governments and turn them into dark shadow versions of themselves. And of course, the U.S. or no other government has ever been perfect. We're in the midst of our evolution here, so I don't think we should be expecting perfection of our cultures and our civilizations at this point in history, But anyways, then, I'm babbling on here. I think that we're at a pretty good stopping point for this episode, my man. I know we have this last video here.
We'll cover this in more detail.
Cover that next episode.
Yeah, we were going to cover a little bit of the identity of the shooter, and then the involvement with BlackRock, and then all the falling apart of every line of security that you could possibly have, and then the Pac-Man of coverage and all that stuff. But at the time for that.
No,
maybe
I
another
think
episode.
Yeah.
And maybe more facts will come out. Facts.
Well, I think so.
Quote unquote facts.
Yeah, we've already given you guys enough today.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's try and continue to figure this thing out together and change this world from the inside out. If you guys have a better idea, please throw it down in the comments. I'm sure there's going to be some points of disagreement here. We're welcome to dialogue with you guys. Let's just do so from a place of willingness to understand one another's perspectives rather than just battle it out.
And I promise I won't call
and
you
not
a
hear
beta.
one another.
Unless I'm doing a quote that's Jesse Lee Peterson going, beta! But that would be more a joke that everybody gets. But anyway. Because there is something that's nice about mutual trolling that I kind of miss about not being on Facebook. Because I had some friends that were only friends because we trolled each other.
Well, that's
it was just this mutual trolling that was really good.
Well, when it's endearing and it's among friends, it's one thing. But when it's with someone with whom you disagree, but if it's with someone with whom we disagree and that we're just being demeaning towards, I don't think it's helping us at all.
Trolling is an art form, not a way to actually just be mean and destructive. It's
Liv talked about in one of those first videos on Moloch was how addictive it is to one up and to call other people out. And so we are immediately separating ourselves from that other person, and now we're battling with an idea of someone rather than the heart of who they are, which is something actually very, very close to who we are at heart as well. We can see that. We can see through eyes of love. We can utilize the compassion that will give us the breadth of consideration that we need to solve this great crisis our species now finds itself in. Without that depth of wisdom, we are lost and we are rudderless out here. I love you guys so much. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Meaning Making 101 here on Actuali Podcast. I've been Chris.
I've been DJ.
We are out. Go.